Well, listen, a good morning to everyone. We are so excited that you can join us for the future Ready Tallahassee webinar series. This morning, we have a treat for you. You know, we've been doing this every month, and we have Jairobe McPherson. Some of you saw online when we posted about him just the tremendous feedback already of his work. And he was recommended to us highly by Sean Maxwell, who was one of our first presenters. But let me introduce you to Jairobe. He is an innovative technologist. He has over 10 years experience with cloud engineering, technical consulting, and product development. He currently works at Google as a cloud engineer focused on applying AI ML to the public sector use cases. And he has done a lot of work engineering with Google Labs R&D incubator. He was born and raised in Atlanta, and he has a BBA in computer information systems from Georgia State University. But we are excited to hear from you, Jairobe, on the amazing tools that you're going to share with us, and also your thoughts about what's coming with AI, what its impact's going to be for all of us in the workforce and in learning. And without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to you. So welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. Good morning, everyone, and certainly happy to be here. So we have a lot of content that we're going to try and cover today. So I'm going to go ahead and just jump into the presentation and run you through how we're going to structure this conversation today, right? And so, we're going to start off and we're going to kind of introduce you all to where we are in terms of the state of the market when it comes to artificial intelligence. And then we're going to go through and talk about a couple of different trends that we've seen and that we're seeing right now as this technology takes a stronghold in society. As we go through some of those trends, we'll start with the grounding and retrieval augmented generation. We'll move into talking a little bit about agentic AI, vibe coding, and then finally we'll end on generative UIs. As we go through each one of these trends, my goal here is to introduce you to some new terms, some new concepts, understand these trends, as well as to introduce you to a couple of tools that coincide with those trends, right? So you all leave here with a little bit more knowledge and a little bit more ability, after we go through this session. And I'm really excited to get started. So let's jump straight into things. And so, really, this is hopefully not a controversial statement, right? AI is shifting from a tool for efficiency into a powerhouse for innovation. And what that really means to me and what it should mean to you all is I think in the past, artificial intelligence was a technology and a tool that was essentially kind of gate kept to data scientists and machine learning engineers, folks that had a lot of years invested into the discipline of utilizing the technology. That has now changed where, the technology has now been democratized, where there are all sorts of different builders that can leverage this technology, whether you're in the private sector, the public sector, a student, a business owner. Now you can utilize these tools to supercharge whatever your objectives are. And really, our goal is to talk you through and make you feel comfortable on using some of the tools that will help you do that for whatever your mission is. But before we do that, we kind of have to talk about where we started and where this hype cycle kind of began. And I want to lead up until where we are today, right? And we're going to talk about how there are different tools that can help you, based on what it is that you want to do with the technology and how it's evolved. And so when you go back in the past to 2022, when, arguably I work at Google, but arguably the company that kind of started the hype cycle was the catalyst for a lot of the interest in the AI that we're seeing today is OpenAI when they launched ChatGPT in 2022, right? So, when that happened, you had a couple of different model providers that you could interact with, the OpenAI, ChatGPT. At Google, we had a model called Lambda that eventually became Palm and now is represented by our Gemini family of models. But really, the message that I want to send is in those early days, it was really just you and that model that you were interacting with, right? And so those models, that technology was really impressive because you could interact with it in a way where it seemed almost human-like, right? And it had an enormous amount of information that it could provide to you as an end user based on the training of data sets that essentially encompass the entire internet, right? And that was really interesting. But the limitation with that model is that these pre-trained LLMs, these pre-trained models, they really can only interact with you based on the knowledge that they've been trained on, right? And so very quickly after those models and those products launched, you saw a shift towards the need to actually provide your own contextual information and knowledge to these models and interact with those models based on that, the information that's relevant to you and your mission. And that's where you'll see this term retrieval augmented generation come into play. It's really just a fancy way of saying that you have provided the model with the context specific to what you're trying to accomplish. And when you interact with that model, it uses that context to respond to you as opposed to just responding to you in a generic manner. That kind of was the second wave that we saw probably from 2023-ish to to early mid 2024 to probably early 2025. You heard a lot about people building these RAG systems and grounding their data in the models, right? But fast forward to where we are now, we've gone beyond just this idea of interacting with the models using natural language and synthesizing information. Now we are in the era of agents. And we're going to talk a little bit more in a second about what agents are. But at a high level, right, agents take this idea of interacting with the information that a model holds beyond just synthesis, right? When we talk about agents, these are AI entities that can actually do things and complete tasks for you. And so when we get into the agent section, we're going to talk a little bit more about what that means and some of those tools that you all can leverage to build these agentic AI systems, which are really taking the industry and society by storm, right? But before we move on, I think I want to make sure that everyone understands that while this technology and these trends are extremely powerful, not everybody needs an agent, right? Not everybody needs to do retrieval augmented generation. It's not to say that there isn't value in just interacting with a pre-trained model off the shelf. Some of you all that are attending this, you're the tasks, the things that you want to accomplish, they can probably be accomplished just by interacting with one of these really super intelligent models, right? And so our goal here today is to introduce you to the tools on how you can essentially interact with the models off the shelf, provide your own data if you'd like to provide your own data, or build agentic systems. And what direction, what approach you go is going to be specific to you and what it is that you specifically are trying to accomplish and achieve, right? But now that we kind of have a map in terms of the different stops along this AI journey, let's jump into talking about some of these concepts and introducing you all to some of the tools that make these possible. So we'll go back to kind of that second stop in the road, right? And talk about grounding and retrieval augmented generation. And once again, when we talk about what grounding is, it's really all about providing your own information to the model, right? Where if you see on the screen, this example here showcases what an LLM, what one of these AI systems looks like if it is not grounded, right? And so, while the LLMs, because they have essentially farmed the entire internet, may have context and understand that, Taylor Swift is one of the biggest, if not the biggest, artists on the planet right now, it doesn't have the context as to real-time information, what her concert and tour schedule looks like, because it's trained on data that was frozen in time, right? And so while that data can be very helpful for some types of interactions, there are other interactions that really require contextual and specific information to be able to be useful to you all as end users. And that's where we talk about this concept of retrieval augmented generation, where you are able to plug in your own data into the actual model itself, right? Where if this similar query came in from an end user, when is the next concert? that LLM actually does a search first. It goes and says, okay, I think the user wants to understand the schedule for this individual. Let me do a search. And it's going to essentially bring back information that's relevant to the query from the end user, the prompt from the end user, and utilize that information, inject it into the response of the actual model, right? Instead of just using the pre-trained model, right? And so one of the other things that's a really big trend right now is this idea of context engineering. So if that's not a term you've heard before, I'll introduce it to you. You know, look it up. But context engineering is this idea of essentially going and building a very robust corpus of information that you can feed into a generative AI system like this to ground it, right? And so this is really a concept more so for folks that are using this technology for enterprise and business use cases where you may have a ton of proprietary information, a ton of proprietary internal data sources that you want to ground your AI systems on. And you have to think about and be very thoughtful about the way that you organize and structure that information so that the AI can actually use it in the best way. And that entire process of essentially prepping the data to be used by one of these AI systems is the idea of context engineering, right? It goes hand in hand with this concept we're talking about with retrieval augmented generation. All right. So, and yeah, just real quick, you know, if you want to actually break down the term of what the fancy acronym means, you know, when you are prompting the model, it is going to do a search or a retrieval of information. It's going to take that information. It's going to augment the response. It's going to generate and augment the response. And that's kind of where you get this idea of retrieval augmented generation. But you all can just think of it as RAG. All right. So now that you all have a somewhat of an understanding of what grounding and retrieval augmented generation is, let's talk a little bit about some tools really quickly that you can use to actually do this, right? And so right now, one of the flagship tools on the market is a tool that Google has developed. It's actually out of my old organization, Google Labs, called Notebook LM. And Notebook LM is a phenomenal tool. It essentially builds a RAG system for you without you having to do any of the work yourself, right? So the way that this product works is you essentially you're going to use it as a research and thinking partner. It's going to be grounded in any information you put into the system, right? And that can be a website, that could be slides, it could be documents, PDFs, text. You can do videos as well, right? Essentially, you put in whatever information you want the AI to have context of, and the AI then just magically kind of understands that information and responds to you based on the information that you've put in, right? And so it's really that simple, nothing fancy. Either you can upload your sources or you can connect them through some of the integrated connectors, right? And you can chat with the information that you've provided to the system. Not only can you chat with it, you can also create other formats of that information synthesis as well, right? And so one of the breakthrough capabilities that I think made this tool really popular was its ability to generate audio overviews or essentially podcasts, which is really neat. And that's kind of expanded beyond just generating podcasts on your data. It's, you know, now you can generate mind maps, videos, all sorts of things to help you consume that information that you've essentially fed into the model instead of it just using it off of the shelf, right? And so I'm going to kick out right now and see if I can just do a quick demo, just orient you with the tool. It is a tool that's available for anybody with a Google account to use. And then there are also some enterprise versions of the tool, depending on whether or not you have a business context need. So, all right, now bear with me. I'm going to try to stop sharing and share a different tab, show you this tool.
So, Jairobe, while you're doing that, I'm just gonna step in real quick for everyone listening. My brother is a dentist, and he uses Notebook LM, and he was doing some research, okay, on different techniques and tools in the dental field. Well, what he did is he had it create a podcast, and so it did the research on everything that he said was a trusted source. And within, I mean, no time at all, it gathered all of the articles, the resources, everything out available, every medical, sourced item. And it created a 30-minute podcast with two people talking about the product that he wanted more information on. So for those of you who have not tried this, it is like a game changer.
Isn't that amazing, Angela? It's for me
Amazing.
personally, I use it not only to learn, but also for just entertainment as well, right? So I've essentially replaced my podcast consumption with my own curated podcast where
Yes.
there's something I'm interested in, whether it's educational or entertainment, I'll just go and find my sources and create a podcast, and now I have a something to listen to on my way to work, right?
Yeah. Awesome.
All right. Are you guys seeing the screen that says Notebook LM?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Sorry, I can't. It's not showing me. All right. So, for those that want to try out the tool, all you need to do is go to notebooklm.google.com, right? Again, as long as you have a, Gmail account, you can utilize the free version of the product. There's an enterprise version as well, again, that has more controls in terms of the sources that go into the platform, and how that data is kind of protected for our enterprise and business users. But for most of us, we can probably just try the free one, at least for starters, right? And so the way that this works is it's pretty straightforward. Each one of these interactions with the model is encapsulated in a notebook. And so if I want to create a new one, I simply say, I want to create a notebook. And then it's going to ask me, what sources of information, do you actually want to drop in, right? And so, again, I can do files on my local desktop. If there's websites, videos from YouTube, Google Drive, or you can just copy and paste stuff in there, right? Another thing that's pretty cool is if you want, you can just actually have it curate some sources for you based on the topic that you want to essentially research, right? And so let's say I'm interested in the latest advancements uh, in artificial intelligence and machine learning, right? Just something generic like that. Whatever you want to put in here, you can essentially tell it, go find me the sources. You'll see here on this left-hand panel, it's researching some websites it can pull in as context. And in a minute here, it'll just fill up with some sources that it went and fetched. And then I can begin to interact with them, right? And so it looks like it went and found a couple things. I'm going to say import. And in a minute here, it's going to go and summarize all these different sources that it's brought in. It's pretty cool, right? And so while it's still importing the sources, just to orient you with kind of the structure of the platform, right over here, as you see in this left-hand pane, this is where you manage your sources. And when this is done, if you want to add sources on top of this, you can do that on your own. This chat interface is where you're going to interact with that data in natural language, right? Ask it questions, tell it to generate ideas, whatever you want. And then over on the left-hand side, this is the studio pane where you have that option to, again, convert some of the knowledge, some of the sources into different formats for your own consumption, right? Where we have now expanded from audio reviews to videos, mind maps, there's flashcards, now there's slide decks, all sorts of different things here in terms of how you can consume the information, right? And so cool. So I got 10 sources in here. It says the provided sources offer a comprehensive look at artificial intelligence landscape in 2025, blah, 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 blah. This is pretty cool though, right? And already off the bat, if you don't know what sorts of things you want to ask, of this data, you can essentially just use one of these existing prompts right here, right? So, how will AI agents transform global business operations? Well, that's something that we're going to talk about here in a few minutes, but let's see what it has to say based on these sources, right? And while it's doing that, any of these sources that you want to essentially explore, right? Especially in this case, since we imported them, you can just click on them and it'll kind of break down the actual source for you, right? So this is like a view into, looks like that Wikipedia source that we added in there, right? So, anyways, so yeah, now I can just begin to talk to the information. Now, again, this is an example where we're pulling from the internet, but just imagine now if you are a student, if you are pulling in research papers or maybe papers that you've written yourself in the past, right? You're pulling in PDFs of your textbooks and helping you break down a specific concept that it's been really difficult for you to grasp, right? Or if you're a business owner, just think about you actually putting in, financial documents or policies and just interacting with this system and allowing it to just operate on that subset of information that you provided. The capabilities are really endless. And so I want to move on here. The last thing I want to show really quickly is, well, actually, I'll show you guys what one of the outputs from Studio looks like in a second, but also you can toggle how you actually interact with the Notebook LM model, right? The conversational style. You can essentially come in here and say, hey, when you respond to me on this data that I fed in, I want you to respond to me like I'm a PhD student, or I want you to respond to me like I'm a fifth grader, because, if you break things down in simple terms, it's easier for me to understand. You can choose also the response length. So there's a lot of flexibility in terms of how you actually interact with this AI based on the data that you fed in. It's a really, really neat tool. I encourage you all to check it out. And I'll just show you really quickly what some of the media looks like, right? This is a notebook that I had already on kind of a similar topic where I had it generate a podcast. See if you guys can hear. Pretty cool, right? Like we won't go through that whole thing, but whole 13 minutes of content based on these sources that I put in over there, right? So
Jairobe, real quick, I've got a few questions from the
sure.
audience. Okay. First is, what is the cost of Notebook LM to keep your searches private? You mentioned there's a free version and a paid.
Yes, there's a free version, there's a paid version. The paid version is going to depend on how you actually purchase Notebook LM, right? So I won't get into all the details, but there's a couple of different ways you can get it. You can get it as like a standalone product. If you get it as a standalone product, I want to say the price is around $10 per user per month, right?
Okay.
And so what that gets you above and beyond the free version is you can essentially integrate a lot more data, right? That data is going to be secure, protected. It's going to be, essentially encompassed by our cloud platform, which has a lot of enterprise security controls, encryption, that sort of thing, right? But there are other ways that you can get Notebook LM bundled in with other tools, right? So, when we get into talking about the agentic AI, there is
Right.
a platform there that we're going to discuss where when you buy access to that platform, you get Notebook LM for free, right? So
Okay.
it kind of just depends. But I guess to answer your question, really the lowest price that you'll get if you just want to get Notebook LM as a standalone is going to be around $10 per user per month,
Okay.
subject to different discounts and stuff depending on what type of entity you are.
Okay.
That helps.
One other quick question. Well, there's two more, but this one's quick. Is there a word limit when
Is
you're inputting? Like ChatGPT has 1,000 word limit
yes.
sometimes in conversation.
Yes, that is a great question. It's a great question, and it touches on this concept of context windows, right? And so, if anyone, if no one, if you've not heard of what a context window is, it's a technical term that describes the amount of data that you can actually feed into a given model at a given time, right? And so there is a context window limit. It kind of depends on the model that you're using. What I'll say is for the Gemini models that we have at Google,
Mhm.
they're touted for having some of the largest context windows on the market. Now, there are, again, to be fair, I want to say either Claude or OpenAI just released a model recently that has like a million token context window. But anyways, a million tokens, it can translate to like an entire library of books. It can translate to, X thousand hours of video. It's a very, very, very high limit. But again, it's just going to kind of depend on the model that you're using, right? So,
Great, great.
um, right.
Okay. Last quick question, then we'll move on to your next portion.
Yep.
Jenna wants to know, is Notebook LM better than ChatGPT? And I know ChatGPT is wrong like 52% of the time, according to open source, right? So what do you think about the comparison?
Well, you know what? Even as a Google employee, my goal here is not to talk down about our competitors, right? I mean,
Right.
OpenAI, ChatGPT, I mean, it's a great tool, right? It's a great tool. But what I would say to that question is, I don't even think that comparing ChatGPT to Notebook LM is a fair comparison, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because when you think about the core ChatGPT, really all that is just an interface into the OpenAI models, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so the analog for that on the Google side is actually just the Gemini app, right?
Yeah.
Notebook LM is its own app that takes that a step further, where you're bringing in your own information, right? That is the difference between Notebook LM and ChatGPT. That is the difference between Notebook LM and just using Gemini app off of the shelf, right? So if you ask me, I would say that for certain use cases, where you have specific data that you want to interact with, then Notebook LM is the best tool above ChatGPT, as well as above Gemini and other tools on the market, right? For that
Excellent.
specific purpose. Hopefully that
Thank
helps.
you.
All right. Let me see if I can jump back into the presentation and let's continue on. All right, let's do Chrome tab. Next steps here. All right. All right, cool. All right, so we talked about Notebook LM. Here's some key uses. Kind of talked about that. We'll just skip through all this because I think we did that. And yeah, I'll just kind of end on this for Notebook LM, right? It's going to be grounded information that you have. It's going to give you more accurate responses, less hallucinations. You can essentially extract, synthesize insights very quickly, right? It's multimodal. That means you can process text, videos, images, audios, and output all of those different formats and transform content as well. It's a really, really neat tool. And sorry, actually, this is the one that I want to show, right? So, in terms of ways that you can use it, again, if you're a student, if you're a researcher, a great, great, great research tool, right? For me, trying to stay on the bleeding edge of AI is difficult if you're not reading the latest papers, right? And for any of you who have gone and taken on the daunting task of reading research papers, it's very difficult. A tool like a Notebook LM makes it a lot easier, right? Use it as a writing assistant, strategy analysis, all sorts of things, right? There are tons of different use cases for this type of tool. But let's move on and talk about how we've evolved beyond just the synthesis of information with Notebook LM and talk about agentic AI, right? Now, this is the trend. This is the direction of the technology that I personally think is really going to be, for lack of a better term, the game changer with this technology. This is what makes me a believer in that AI is going to fundamentally change humanity, right? So let's talk about what it means. What is an AI agent, right? And so an AI agent is essentially a system that can not only retrieve information and provide it to you, but can actually do its own reasoning, execute plans, essentially maintain a memory in a lot of ways. And there's a lot of research being done in this area and trying to give these agents memory as if they were human beings, like long term memory. But really, the main thing, despite the capabilities that an agent has, the, the reason they're valuable is that you can essentially send them to go and complete tasks, complex and sophisticated abstract tasks on your behalf. And in some cases, and I want to highlight this, in some cases without your supervision, but in most cases under your supervision. And that is a very, very important point, right? Because I think a lot of people are come in and just think, oh, we have this AI, it can do X, Y, and Z. I'll just send it off to do its thing and I'll, we don't need humans anymore, right? No, they still need guidance. They still need context. They still need some form of instruction on how to actually complete the task that it is that you have for them. And you don't really want to let these things run wild and run loose, right? You still want to have a human in the loop for 99% of use cases. Now, there are some micro tasks, micro work streams that you'll see here when we talk about some of the tools, you can actually let AI go and do on its own. But by and large, they still need our supervision. And that is why, in many cases where people think that the AI is going to replace people's jobs, in many cases, it's just going to fundamentally change the way we do them, right? Anyways, that's what an AI agent is. Another way of thinking about it is like, or the application of it is thinking about ordering a burger or going to a fast food joint, right? So, when you roll up to Wendy's or Sonic or pick your favorite fast food chain, you essentially just order something to eat. You're not there telling the cook how to actually cook the burger. You're basically just saying, this is what I want. This is the output that I want, right? And then you just kind of go to the window and magically your burger appears, right? Now, inside the actual restaurant, the cooks, the folks that are making your burgers, they kind of conceptually understand what it means when you say you want a burger without you having to explicitly tell them, give me 2 buns and a patty and lettuce, blah, blah. They get that. They also have access to tools that they use to actually go and cook your burger for you, right? Now, you don't have to explicitly tell them what tools to use. They just innately figure out, okay, well, for this part of the cooking process, this is the tool that I'm going to need. And so agents are very much like that, where in the past, before we had agentic AI, you had to really explicitly give very detailed, granular instructions for every single thing that you wanted a computer system to do, right? It wasn't just make me a burger. It was, go get the patty, warm the patty up, put the patty on top of yeah, now you don't have to do that. So I'm going to transition now into a more technical slide, but I think this is important because this will help you disambiguate between what an AI agent is and how it differs from just the core large language model or AI in general, right? And so when we talk about the key components of an agent, there are 4 things. There is a model that powers that agent, right? So the model is your OpenAI, your Gemini, your Claude. It's what you guys think of when you think of AI, but really that's just the engine. The agent itself operates on top of the model, where the model now has access to different tools that could be data, right? Again, proprietary data that you have, data from third party systems. It has the ability to execute its own function. So essentially, write and execute its own code to do custom things with that data if you have data integrated. In many cases, and this is an important concept as well, it may have access to other agents, right? Where if you have agent that does X, Y, and Z, there may be a different agent that can do A, B, and C, and your first agent can actually use that second agent as a tool. We're going to talk a little bit more about that. On top of the models and the tools, you have an orchestration layer, right? This is essentially the brain of the agent, where it takes in the goals and the instructions that you provided to it as the agent creator. It has this semblance of memory where it can understand. Again, we're trying to increase the length that the agents can actually understand, but by and large, they have like a short term and long term memory. Where if you told them to do something 3 steps ago, they don't forget it. And then they have these reasoning and thinking modules where they can essentially take in all of these tools they have access to, all of the pre-trained information that the models have, and all of the goals and instructions you've given them, and come up with their own roadmaps on how to execute what it is that you've asked them to do, right? And all of that runs encapsulated in this runtime, which just is kind of dependent on the platform that you're using to utilize the agent, right? Um, so let me just pause there too, because I know that agentic concept can be sometimes a little bit tricky to comprehend and understanding what an agent is versus just an AI model. So let me pause and just see if anyone has any questions.
If you have a question, go ahead and raise your hand virtually, or you can put it in the Q&A section.
Let me see if I can actually check that. No open questions. Okay. Okay, we can continue moving on, and if we have questions, we can go back.
Jairobe, there is one
Oh, there is
question.
one. I can see it.
Natasha, hi Natasha. She says, great session, loving this. As these AI tools become more capable, how should organizations think about developing the human skills needed to work alongside them? And are there particular capabilities or mindsets that you see are going to be essential?
That is a great question, Natasha. Great question. And so, my perspective on that question is, I think the main skill, and this may sound cliche, but the main skill that is going to need to be developed in organizations now that you have these tools is the ability to frame problems and solve and come up with workflows and steps for solving those problems. And again, it sounds cliche. It kind of sounds like intuitive, like of course people need to be problem solvers. But honestly, I think in the past, without some of these tools, there are many folks in different organizations that have become experts in technology and not necessarily experts in problem solving. And this reverses all that because you don't need to be an expert in technology as much anymore. What you need to do to make use of these tools in the most transformational way is be able to understand how to frame what it is that you need to get done, right? How to quantify the success of that task being completed, and how to actually structure a workflow that you can provide to an agent to execute, right? And so I think now is the time where, if you think about any complex business process, I talk to a lot of different, organizations, private and public sector, and in many cases, right, you'll see them say, "Hey, we have this problem that we have to solve," and they break out into a whole process flow of if this then that, and then if this thing gets approved there, we got to send it to this person, and then they got to review this. Understanding that understanding of essentially like the tribal knowledge in your organization and capturing that, and then understanding how to translate that into instructions that an AI agent will understand, that those are going to be the biggest skills, if you ask me, right? And so, yeah, I don't know if I articulated it well, but I would summarize by saying, Natasha, the biggest skill is going to be in really deeply understanding your business problems and being able to communicate those, right? It's going to be less so on, hey, this guy knows how to code and he's valuable because of that. We don't need that anymore. The AI agent can code, right? What do you need to code? Understanding that is going to be critically important. And then the last thing that I'll say too, actually, on the flip side, outside of just being able to frame the problems, the other skill set that is going to be really important is understanding how to evaluate how these AI agents are actually performing, right? To being able to go in and understand when it completes a task, when it gives you an output, how to break down what process did the agent go through to produce this output, right? And how do I go back and iterate and tweak that? How did the AI tool actually select, or AI agent select what tools it needed to execute, right? So understanding how they actually reason through a problem, and how to go back and basically iterate on that is going to be critically important as well, right? So those are just kind of two tidbits that I think will be really important. And yeah, hopefully that's helpful for you guys as you think through how to adapt your organizations to this technology.
Excellent. Thank you.
All right. All right, let's move on here. I think we're doing pretty good on time. But okay, cool. So those are the four components of an agent. Let's move on. Just high level, there are different types of agents that you can essentially build and deploy for different use cases. On one end of the spectrum, you have deterministic agents, right? So these are agents that are a little bit more strictly defined in terms of how they behave, right? And so, you know, this is another important concept. If you're thinking about building and utilizing agents for, your own business, your own organization, your own use cases, you need to match the type of agent to the level of risk that you have in your actual mission, as well as the amount of data that you have. It's not a one agent solves all type thing, right? In some cases, again, if you are somebody that is in like the medical field, right, where you need an agent to do a very specific set of steps, right? Maybe you're screening for some particular type of disease, right, where you're having the agent actually analyze some samples that you've received from a patient. That needs to be really tight, right? Like that's not something that you really want the agent just kind of making up its own ideas on how to execute, right? There's some things that you need to have a very high level of control and predictability on how the agent is going to function and what it's actually going to produce, right? Now, on the far end of the spectrum, you have agents that are purely generative, right? Where they are very abstract in thinking. You don't really give them much instructions. You don't really define a whole bunch. You just kind of ask them to go out there and do their thing, and then come back to you with the results, right? And so, there are applications and use cases, maybe in the creative domain, where these types of agents are going to be, more useful to you, right? Let's say you have an agent that is in charge of, generating brand specific content for a marketing campaign you're going to do, right? Maybe you don't want to tell it exactly how to generate that content, then you just do it yourself. Maybe you want to give it a lot of freedom. A generative agent on the far end of the spectrum is better for that. And then in the middle, there's obviously a mix of both that you can have where you balance it out, where you give the agent some flexibility to go and kind of be abstract, but you do give it some guardrails and guidelines in terms of how it's going to produce the outcomes, right? And by and large, you'll probably find for most of you on this call, you'll probably aim for, generally speaking, the hybrid agents more so than one of the ones that are more extreme, unless you have a use case that specifically calls for that. All right, cool. So just real quickly too, in terms of the architectures, how you actually use these agents together, there's different ways you can do it. You can build one agent that has access to the relevant tools, right? Pretty easy to implement. You just give it its instructions, that sort of thing. Or, for some of you that get more sophisticated in terms of the use cases that you have, you can potentially deploy multi-agent architectures where you have a coalition of different agents that each have their own specific goals, tools, orchestration logic that work together to actually go and produce or achieve a common goal, right? And there's lots of different patterns for how you can do that, right? A popular pattern is having an orchestrator agent and then sub agents underneath that orchestrator agent, where anytime something comes into the orchestrator agent at the top, it then kind of intelligently decides, oh, I need to redirect the request to agent A or agent B based on that request, versus something that's more like a sequential process where you go from one agent to the next in sequence and the output from one is being passed to the other. There are tons of different patterns on how you can build these systems. This is an area where, again, for those of you who are maybe in the enterprise, that have more sophisticated use cases, it'll be really important that as you're upskilling on the technology, you partner with a team, an organization that is really well versed in the different options, right? Because it's not a one size fits all thing. All right. So, in terms of impact and types of agents, you can develop all sorts of things: customer service agents, agents that are for your internal staff, employees, faculty, again, creative agents for producing content or understanding content. Data agents are really big and really hot. I think now more than ever, if you are an organization that sits on troves and troves of information and data that it's been difficult for you to make sense of, it's really easy, or a lot easier nowadays, to throw an agent on top of that and have that agent be the interface for that data, right? Gone are the days where you need to have someone who is an expert in building graphs and charts and histograms. You can have an agent just do that stuff for you. Coding agents are another one that are really hot right now, wherein you can essentially have agents that will produce, test, write code for you. Really hot area. We're going to talk a little bit more about that. Got 15 minutes left, so I'm going to try to run through the rest of this and show a couple more demos. In terms of agentic platforms, Google has an agentic platform. It used to be called Agent Space. Now it's called Gemini Enterprise. But essentially what it is it's a tool that allows you to have a single pane of glass for various agents that you would bring into the fold, right? So those can be third-party agents that other organizations have built. Google has a number of out-of-the-box agents that are just embedded in the platform. There are no-code agents if you are, or you have folks that are not developers that actually still want to build their own agents, right? And then you have high-code agents like our agent development kit, where folks that are developers can go and build agents from scratch, right? Gemini Enterprise is this place where you can pull all of that together in a single interface and provide access to them, right? In addition to providing a lot more controls over the data that the agents actually would have access to. Now, there are other platforms out there too, but again, I think one of the things that really sets the Gemini agentic platform apart is just, if nothing else, the first party agents that Google is building and dropping into that environment, which is pretty cool. All right, lots of agents in the marketplace. Yeah, we can kind of skip this. I'm going to quickly show you what that platform looks like, and then we're going to move on and kind of wrap up the sessions. So let me share my screen one more time. Let's do a window. Let me see if I can share that. All right. Are you guys seeing the Notebook LM screen again?
Yes.
Okay. How about now? Are you seeing something that says Gemini Enterprise?
Yes.
Okay, cool. So this is Gemini Enterprise platform. I'm going to blow through it really quickly. Right here in the middle, you can kind of use it just like you would use a Gemini, right? So, tell me who is the current president? I don't know, something like that, right? And it's going to go out and it's going to respond to that. But what you get over and above regular Gemini with Gemini Enterprise is this ability to connect different sources that, again, are maybe proprietary to you. There's a whole ton of sources in here. I only have a few connected to this environment. But basically, in a very similar way to Notebook LM, you can provide your own data that Gemini Enterprise is going to be able to utilize. You can also select the different models that you want to use. You can have it create or pick the model itself. But really, really, really where the power of this platform comes in is in the agents itself, right? And so if I navigate over here to agents, there are a couple of agents that have been built for me by Google. I have some custom agents that I've already embedded into the platform. Some of you may have noticed here. What's this OpenAI doing here? I actually have an OpenAI agent that Gemini Enterprise can connect to if I'm feeling that itch to go and use one of OpenAI's models, right? So I can actually bring in other models into Gemini Enterprise. And again, for folks that are lower code, if I want to go and create an agent, I can actually just start typing in natural language instructions on the agent I want to create. Or there's actually this neat little builder that I can use to build agents as well, right? Where if I come in here, I won't build one all the way now, but I can simply give an agent a name, I can give it a description, and I can start to give it instructions what it is that I want it to do, as well as choose my model. If I have any specific information that I want to essentially provide or connect into the agent, I can essentially connect my data sources there. And it's a really neat way, again, for someone who is not a a core developer to go and create agents and share them out with their organizations. And furthermore, too, you can get really crazy with this and start actually developing multi-agent systems, kind of like I said, right? Where, perhaps I have two agents that are being orchestrated by this top level agent where sub-agent one may have a different set of instructions, a different set of connectors and tools than sub-agent two. It can kind of get really crazy with how you structure these things, right? And so, in addition to being able to create these in the platform, again, there are ways that developers can go and embed agents directly into the platform for your end users. So, it's a really neat tool. This is an area where we're seeing a lot of adoption in the enterprise because many companies, many organizations are realizing that they can reimagine some of their former and legacy applications and workflows into these agentic systems that they can just embed in one specific place, right? So that's just a quick overview. Again, there's a lot you can do in Gemini Enterprise. If folks are interested, then hook up with Angela and Katie and myself, and we can do follow-up sessions. All right. I'm going to run through a couple more concepts, and then we will wrap up for the day. Let me see here. I want to do a Chrome tab. Let's go back here. All right. Cool. So we've talked a little bit about agents. We talked a lot about just feeding data in. Now let's talk about how you actually produce some of these agents, right? Or build software that's kind of in the next generation of software, if you will, right? So if no one has heard of the term vibe coding is really this idea that you can essentially create software without having to explicitly write code, right? And so, when you look at that from the perspective of someone like me who, for context, I'm what they call a full stack developer. That means I can write code on the front end, the back end, and everything in between. Nowadays, you don't need someone like me to go and build an application, right? Back in the day, you'd have to hire me and tell me what it is you wanted me to build, and I'd go build the thing. Now you can essentially tell AI to build that for you, right? And so vibe coding is a really, really easy way for folks that don't have that traditional background to begin creating applications. But there are also tools for folks like myself who do have a background in traditional software development. And there's ways that you can use AI to essentially just accelerate that process of engineering that you may already know how to do as a developer. And so when we talk about some of the different tools that you have, again, this is going to be a Google stack of tools, but if you look out into the market, you'll see that other providers, your Anthropics, your OpenAIs, are going to have similar tools to some of these. I think we still have the best tools for many of these things, but generally they'll fall into one of these different categories, right? Where on the vibe coding side, if you really, really just want to go in and create stuff, right? Be that applications, software, even games now, Google AI Studio is a really cool place to start where you can just jump in there and just in natural language say, hey, make me this game or make me this website. And it'll essentially just take your prompt and it'll do it for you. And then you just keep prompting it and iterating on that initial prompt to get to that end output, right? Gemini Code Assist is now a code assistant that is really meant to plug into an existing code base that a developer has. So this is for our more technical folks where now you're using the Gemini AI as an assistant to help you maybe understand your code, maybe test your code, fix it, right? But it's still a very, very hands-on experience from a development standpoint using Code Assist. Moving over to the right, we get into our agentic and autonomous coding tools. Anti-gravity is the newest agentic coding tool that Google has released. This is a fully autonomous or agentic experience where essentially you tell the tool to go and build a piece of software for you, and you kind of just leave it. It generates the plan. it goes and executes that plan, and you essentially come back when your coffee is done and see what it did, right? Gemini CLI is an open source agent where it has visibility into your entire directory structure, everything on your local machine, essentially, and you can use it and interact with it through a command line interface if you're that type of developer. And Jules is kind of very similar to Anti-Gravity. It is an autonomous coding agent. In practice, it's very similar to Anti-Gravity. Now that Anti-Gravity is out, I would recommend that you guys that are interested kind of start there. All right, so we can kind of skip by this. Just real quick, again, if you're an individual, I would probably start out with Anti-Gravity if you are just starting and don't know where to start at all. Google AI Studio and Firebase Studio are really cool if you want something that is a little bit less technical, right? So again, Google AI Studio is really, you're just prompting just natural language. Anti-Gravity does kind of assume that you are comfortable working in an integrated development environment. So it does kind of assume you have a little bit of developer chops, but I'd say just try all of these tools and kind of see what works for you. And then when you start talking about folks that are doing this in the enterprise, Gemini CLI, Code Assist, these types of things are going to be really important for anybody that's doing this at an enterprise scale where you have multiple developers, a complex, sophisticated code base that needs to be understood. There are tools like that for you. All right. We only have a few minutes left, so unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to show any of the development tools, but definitely check them out. The last thing that I want to show you guys, and this is kind of my spiel on where the technology is really, really going, is generative UIs. And so, generative UIs or generative user interfaces. This is the idea that perhaps you've already built an agent or built some software that can do some really phenomenal things, can interact with users. Really, in the past, the way that we've interacted with these models has really just been natural language and text. It's text in, text out. We are now getting into the era where these AIs are able to dynamically generate rich media experiences on the fly. This is like a dynamic web, right? Another way of saying this is the AI is now generating applications specific to the user, specific to what the user wants to do on demand, just like that, right? Now, if you kind of miss the significance of that, let me try and lay it out for you as bluntly as I can. It is going to fundamentally change the way that software is consumed and sold, right? Imagine a world where you don't have to go and buy a license to a particular piece of software and you can just have AI generate it on the fly at that very moment based on what the user needs. Imagine a piece of software that knows everything about you and what you want to do, that it's hyper specific. Every button is customized to you, every graphic that you see is customized to you. That is what we're talking about when we're talking about with generative AI, UIs, and that is kind of where the technology space is going, right? So, apologies, we're kind of at the end of the session. I've run out of time, but hopefully I've seeded you all with some interest in some of these tools and where the industry is going, and you now have at least a direction on where to go to investigate more and leverage these. So I want to thank you guys again for your time. Angela, Katie, thank you for bringing me on board, and I'm happy to connect with anybody after this session to talk more about these topics.
Jairobe, that was outstanding. So we give you a virtual
Thank
applause.
you.
A lot of people are saying thank you. Remarkable. I would like to ask two questions. Would you be willing to come back and do a part 2 webinar so we can kind of go through the next phase? If yes,
Yeah.
that would be awesome. And then I'm going to invite you personally to our AI Innovation Summit, as well as everybody on this call. It will be June 16th and 17th here at Tallahassee State College. It's part of our Future Ready Tallahassee initiative, and it will be half day June 16th. We're going to launch it at 1 o'clock. and we'll do a full day the next day. But you are remarkable, and I have learned just listening to you. So I just want to say thank you. For those of you who are asking, can you have a copy of the presentation for reference? This presentation's been recorded. It will be shared back out with all of you. And Jairobe, if you're okay with it, we can share your contact as well.
Absolutely.
But thank you. You are remarkable. So listen,
Thank-
everyone. Yes, have a beautiful day, and we will be in touch.
All right. Take care, everyone. Thanks.
All right. Bye-bye.